Greetings, Cap fans, and welcome to episode 123 of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast. This is Rick Verbanis. I'm your host, and I am joined by Bob Lucius, who is the best gosh darn co-host out there. Oh, Bob. Love. Exciting and new. Come aboard. We're expecting you and love. Life's sweetest reward. Let it flow. It floats back to you, the love boat. All right, Bob. Welcome to episode 123.
Oh man, I loved that show as a kid.
I know that ran 1977 to 1986.
Yeah, that's a
Gavin
good run.
McLeod.
Yeah, Julie, Gopher, Isaac.
Hold on. All right, gotta do the Isaac. Yeah. and they didn't even show his name. It was just your bartender, Ted
Right.
Lang, your bartender.
Oh goodness, great show. Great show,
wasn't it? That was a fun show.
Yeah.
It was. And so why am I singing about the Love Boat, Bob? Because today's episode is all about the Valentine's Day. Now, if you're listening when this podcast drops, Valentine's Day was yesterday or last night. Some of you might still be celebrating Valentine's Day.
Might still be going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But so we figured it's time to get back to the top 10 list. We haven't done a top 10 list in quite some time, Bob.
We haven't. Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah.
Technically, we did do a top 10 list when we did the top 10 other Cap retcons. We did part 1 in episode 84, part 2 in episode 89. So that was technically, I mean, it really wasn't. I mean, because we'd talk about it, but we didn't do like a countdown.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
It wasn't a countdown top 10.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to work on my Casey Kasem. I've been able to do Casey Kasem in some points in my life, but not now. And I haven't practiced it in a while. I really should have done it for this one.
Yeah, that would have been nice. I'm disappointed.
Well, welcome to my wife. No, but the only true other top 10 list we did was all the way back in episode 9, Bob.
Yeah.
That was, I mean, I'm not a math major, but that was 114 episodes ago.
Yeah.
Why did we wait so long?
Or a long, long time in cat years. Yeah.
Boy, yeah. But back then, episode 9, we did the top 10 villains not named the Red Skull. And it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of people call in, leave messages, send us their votes online. And we figured, we'd do the same time this time. But this time, Bob, tying it in with Valentine's Day, this one is top 10 romantic love interests of Captain America.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, I don't know about you, but when I thought through this, I mean, there were some boundaries that I set for myself, which is a rare thing. But my boundaries were it had to be in the prime universe, the 616 universe, right? So I didn't go outside, I didn't go into Ultimate Comics.
A little Jaina Van Dyne action,
right? Or Natasha Stark or any of these other off the wall multiverse variants of Captain America. We're just stuck. But which made it a bit of a challenge for I think a lot of folks when they were thinking through them in the group, right? Because we wanted to come up with 10. So I mean, you can always come up with a handful of them, but you really got to think through the problem to come up with 10.
That's true. Yeah, we did struggle a little bit. We even opened it up to say, when we say Captain America, it's not just Steve Rogers. It could be Sam Wilson. It could be Bucky Barnes. It could be Jeff Mace. It could be Burnside.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you know a little something on the side. Oh well, Roscoe. I don't know, bag. He was Captain America for a breakfast.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't really have
I
time
got to
for
get back to Ultimates Captain America.
that. Yeah.
Is it wrong to think that dating Janet Van Dyne, also known as the Wasp, would be good for a man's ego? Because, you know, you're so much larger.
I didn't see that coming.
That's what she said. All right. So, okay. So let's get into this. We had a lot of fun of it on the Facebook group. We sent the poll out there, and we got a lot of responses, Bob. We got over like 150 votes, something like that, in the poll. And I had put out there maybe like 10 or so, and then some people added some, you added some, and then there was a lot of comments in the sections underneath to kind of show like, hey, here's why I picked who I did. So it was fun. I thought maybe we could kind of go through some of those comments as we're going through the top 10 list today.
Lots of romantic guys and gals in our group.
That's true.
Yeah,
indeed.
Who knew?
You know, and so with the, you know, here's what I'd want to do. We have our top 10 list, and we're going to start at 10. We're going to work our way to 1. Now, listen, the top 3 probably isn't going to be a big surprise, but maybe in how we order them and why might be a big surprise. But anyway, how about I just rattle off the top 10 according to the Facebook group?
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to start at the bottom with 0 votes. Somebody put in Holly Ridley.
Okay.
And they put it in, but they didn't vote for it.
Interesting.
Isn't
it? Yeah, that was an interesting take.
Yeah. So some people might be saying, who's Holly Ridley? Well, Holly was the single mom during the Mark Gruenwald era that her son was like a member of Cap's hotline group.
Yeah, right.
Right. And then he went over one time to hang out, and she was like, "Oh, you need to stay for dinner." And she was kind of like,
"I didn't see you at the PTO meeting." Yeah. Right. Yeah.
It's PTA, Bob.
Is it? In some places it's PTO, man.
Is it? Are you thinking of military?
No, I'm not thinking of paid time off. I'm thinking of the parent teacher organization.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. My bad.
Okay. Get out more, man.
Apparently. Holly Ridley. So 0%, 0 votes.
Strange.
Next, Wanda Maximoff.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah. 1% with 1 vote. Connie Fiera. Is it Fiera? Ferrari?
Yeah,
it's
like
not Ferrari. No,
it is.
We went through this last time.
She even says so in the comic book.
I don't have a memory worth crap.
Yeah, she says
we went through
like the sports car.
Okay. Well, then whoever did that should have spelled it correctly in the because they spelled it Ferra.
Yeah. Ferra. That was, I mean, iron or something. Is that?
I don't know. Did I print? Was I the one who did that? 1%, 1 vote. Cynthia Glass.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Who's that, Bob?
That would be in the Adventures of Captain America,
which is not in the 616.
No, but she appeared in Steve Rogers Super Soldier. That 4 issues, 4 issue miniseries.
Okay.
Brubaker, as an LMD. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and Cap recalled. There were several pages of him recalling his time with her during the war.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe we'll get to that. Bob, this next one had 2 votes.
2 votes.
2 votes. Hilda Zemo.
The competitor.
Why?
Hilda
Why, Bob? Listen, I know you want to talk about that. We'll get to it. Okay.
All right. Yeah.
Next one, 2 votes. Layla Taylor.
Layla.
Now, Layla was Sam Wilson's girlfriend during the Captain America and Falcon, run during the 70s. She never
seemed very supportive.
No, gosh, she was the B word, Bob.
Yeah, she was like always tearing down old Sam.
She really was. Talking about the man. Next one, they got 3 votes, which is only 3%. Misty Knight.
All right, I like Misty.
Yeah, Misty Knight. So that's kind of
one.
like a current squeeze of Sam Wilson. Next one with 3 votes, Donna Marie Puentes.
Okay.
Donna Marie was during the Jack Kirby run during the late 70s.
Yes. That's okay.
Then next one with 4 votes, we got Betsy Ross, aka Golden Girl. Followed, get this, coming in 5th place, Natasha Romanoff.
Okay.
Black Widow got 6 votes.
I gotta think it's mostly because of the way she was drawn in volume 5.
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So she was Bucky Barnes when he was taking over Steve's place as the new Cap. The two of them were romantically inclined. 4th place in the Facebook group with 8 votes, Peggy Carter.
It's interesting. I gotta wonder how much of this is a sort of a bleed over effect from the cinematic universe.
I kind of think it was. Yeah. Then we kind of jump. Like all here, we got 1s, 2s, 3s, and then Peggy Carter with 8. Now we're gonna start getting to double digits. Number 3, according to our Facebook members, with 24 votes, which is 17% of those voting, is Bernadette Rosenthal. Coming in number 2, Bob, according to our Facebook listeners, Sharon Carter. She got 40 votes, which was 27%. Of course, the only one left that remaining is Rachel Layton, aka Diamondback, is she got 33% of the votes, 47 votes.
Wow. I gotta tell you, that's surprising to me.
Is it, Bob? Because we'll talk about that when we get to our top 10 list. Right. So just going through the top 10 here, we've got Hilda Zemo, Layla Taylor, Misty Knight, Donna Marie Puentes, Golden Girl, Black Widow, Peggy Carter, Bernie Rosenthal, Sharon Carter, Diamondback. All right. Well, that was the Facebook top 10. Our top 10 is going to be different. I'm going to tell everybody right now. Our top 10 is going to be different. And some of these we'll just save for after the top 10 for some honorable mentions.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
I love honorable mentions. That's what I used to mostly get.
With your participation trophy?
My participation trophies, yeah.
All right, Bob. Do you want to kick us off with number 10?
I sure would, because I've been waiting for this one, right? So yeah, and this is based on my extensive research. I am a doctor of love. And so, I have some expertise in this area. And so for my number 10, I am going to go with Hilda Zemo. Yeah, I know. It's a surprise choice.
Right? What?
Right. Hilda Zemo. It's a bit off the wall. I acknowledge that. Right. But it's stuck with me ever since reading The Medusa Effect, that Captain America one-shot that came out in 1994.
And who was that written by?
Roy Thomas, of course.
That's right.
Yeah, the great, legendary Roy Thomas, in case he's listening. So, as you know, Hilda Zemo is the wife of the Baron Heinrich Zemo and the mother of their only child, Baron Helmut Zemo. Now, according to Helmut's telling in Captain America 168, his mother died of a broken heart in the last days of World War II, following their abandonment of Heinrich. However, in The Medusa Effect, it's revealed that Helmut was raised to believe his mother was dead, even though she had faked her death to escape Heinrich, though she does in fact die shortly thereafter from an accident rigged by Heinrich himself. In any case, in The Medusa Effect, Rick, we see Captain Bucky travel to Spain to track down these stolen plans for this powerful weapon system invented by Nikola Tesla, who happened to die, and they went to investigate his death. And they find this letter written by a woman to Tesla, warning him that the Nazis were going to try to get his device, and they were closing in on him. And her name was supposedly Janice Dare. So they track down this woman in Spain, right? And they go to this bullfight, and Cap saves her as she tumbles over the railing into the ring, and the bull's about to get her, and he managed to save her. And afterwards, he realizes this is in fact the Baroness Hilda Zemo, who, everyone thought had died in this auto accident. So anyway, she agrees to help Cap and Bucky retrieve Tesla's stolen plans because she realizes how dangerous this is and how it would help the Nazis. But she'll only do it if they agree to help her rescue her son from the grasp of his father. Anyway, I don't want to give the exciting details of this story away because I really do love this one shot. But there is a moment in their shared jail cell when Hilda and Cap exchange this really passionate kiss. And one can only wonder where that might have led if the story had ended differently than it did.
Uh-huh. All right. So we might be looking at Baron Zemo with his daddy issues being completely something different.
Exactly, right? Can you imagine that?
Yeah. You stole my mom and my face.
That's right.
Wow. All right. It's an interesting choice for number 10. I'll leave it at that.
I hope that it inspires people to check out the Medusa Effect.
And if you want to check out Captain America 168, that it was the one where she was introduced and the story about her was told. That was that Power Records one, right? Where it had the Phoenix on the cover and shooting at Cap, who's over lava, or the molten adhesive X, right? We did that podcast, episode 29, and it was a lot of fun because we actually took a little couple excerpts from the record and spliced it in as we were going through it. So check that out, episode 29, if you want to listen to the introduction of Baron Zemo 2.
So Rick, what do you got for number 9?
Number 9. By the way, am I the only one who, when you hear the words number 9, thinks of the Beatles?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't. What's number 9? Is that a song?
You're not a Beatles fan?
I'm not. No.
Oh. The more I learn about you.
I'm a Beach Boys fan. So yeah, it's another B band.
Oh boy. Yeah, no, it was off the White Album. It's a thing. All right. So number 9 for me, we've got in here Donna Marie Puentes.
Oh my.
Yes. Or you want to say ojalá, which is Spanish, by the way.
Oh, nice. Good.
Yes.
Well done, man. Many talents.
So the Donna Marie, she was the South American revolutionary who back in, I think it was Captain America 206, she was with Captain America, and this was when Jack Kirby came back, right? And did his 1976 for a couple of years, where he was writing and drawing and editing. So this was this tale, and in there was the introduction of Arnim Zola, the biogeneticist. What do you call him? He's a biofanatic. That's what
biofanatic.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so she was this revolutionary, and she was with Cap, and then he got captured. And then after dealing with Zola's creation Primus, and then fighting the Nazi androids, she escaped Zola's clutches along with Cap. And then Steve and Donna were most certainly attracted to each other, but nothing really came of it at the time because Cap was still very much smitten with Sharon at this point. Cap was, however, particularly impressed, shall we say, with Donna Marie's fierceness in combat. And she later joined the Avengers ground support team, which was, we saw this in Captain America 404, which was right after J.M. DeMatteis left, and right around when Mark Rummel was kicking it off, but which was a rare treat to see. We get to see Donna, Diamondback, and Bernie Rosenthal all in the same story.
Yeah, that was a good story, Rick. And I'd like to think things might have been different if someone other than Kirby had drawn her face in that original story.
Now, be nice. Be nice.
Well, she had a very square face, in that original story.
She's a man, baby. Yeah.
I mean, from the neck up, it was a hard sell in that particular story. But yeah.
Oh, what about the neck down, Bob?
Well,
why are you turning red? Yeah, because didn't she wear she wore like a bikini top and like cut off shorts?
It was like a cutoff shirt or something like
tied.
Yeah,
tied.
Yeah. It was a very interesting look for a revolutionary.
I think there was a lot of teenage boys or preteen boys that were smitten with her, which was why I included her on this list. In fact, I do recall in the Captain America comic book fans Facebook group, I do recall somebody showing a tattoo of Donna Marie.
Yes,
that they had on their person.
Right.
And I don't know if it was leg or arm, but anyway, so obviously not everybody agreed with the whole face comment, Bob.
Yeah.
There were some that were very much smitten with her.
Well, that's true. But we talked, was it last episode or the one before? And we talked about how different folks drew Bernie differently, right? And I had a particular preference, but it's the same with Donna Marie. Later, she showed up in the Avengers and Quasar and in later issues of Captain America around in the 400s. And of course, she was drawn very, very differently by different artists. And so you can certainly, there's something for everyone.
Yes. Yeah. And if anybody wants to check out that podcast where we cover Captain America 208 to 210, which is the introduction of Arnim Zola, we did that in podcast episode 37. So check that out. All right, Bob, we're going to number 8. What do you got?
Number 8. All right. So I am going to go, and this one surprised me a bit, honestly, Rick, because you know how I like to do my research for these podcast episodes, right? So I did a deep dive, into all things romance in Captain America mythos. And I had, kind of forgotten about this one. I had to go back and refresh my memory. But for number 8, I had to go with Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch.
Another shocker, Bob.
Yeah. So, I know you remember that 14-issue Captain America and Falcon miniseries from around 2004, 2005, right? And so you got to go back to that one. And in that one, and it was like issue 6, I think, at the end of issue 6, we see Steve and Wanda, locking lips, in a serious way, right?
They were on a cover too, weren't they?
They were on the cover? Issue 7. Yeah, they were on the cover of that one. And so it's like a huge shock. They were really going to town. So it looked like, the face hugger from Alien. So anyway, it appears though that Steve is having these intense hallucinations and he's exhausted. They're going up against this other guy dressed as Captain America, and it's a really tense time. Lots going on. MODOK's involved in some of those stories. So it's maybe he's weak in a moment of weakness and vulnerability. But we see maybe perhaps Cap's inner desires leaking through this legendary wall of self-discipline, right? Maybe that's what's going on. So, at the beginning of issue 7, the one where they're kissing on the cover, we see that Wanda has spent the night on Steve's couch. And as he comes out of his bedroom in the morning, his eyes do tend to linger a little longer than perhaps they should on her sleeping form until she wakes, and she proceeds to diffuse his mental objections to a budding romance. And she tells him that love isn't always convenient or logical. In fact, she uses this kind of like a parable to explain this conundrum to him, and that at the end of the day, one must find love where one can. And again, they begin kissing again. The second time. This is what we see on the cover.
Is this like that old song? If you can't be with the one you love the one you're with.
I remember my I think it was my 12th grade English teacher used to like sing that to herself in class. It was very awkward, but.
It's not Crosby, Still, Nash and Young. It was maybe it was it CSNY?
I think it might be.
We'll get somebody to correct us on the Facebook page.
Mrs. Canavan, if you want to reach out to her.
I have a funny story about that.
Oh yeah.
So back in the early 90s, I was waiting tables at this restaurant in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I was going to the University of Alabama on an exchange program, and waiting tables to pay rent. And the owners were in deep South, so they were very, very religious. And they had in the mornings they would get up early to make croissants. And oh my God, the most delicious croissants you ever had. I mean, you should have seen the amount of butter they put into these things. But anyway, they'd play the radio, and you'd be jamming around while making something. And that song came on, if you can't be with the one you love the one you're with, right? And, I always thought it was a positive song. Now, of course, I'm like 21 years old, right? So I'm still young. But I always like, that's a positive message, right?
It's about contentment. Yeah.
Yeah. And the guy there, one of the owners, he's like, no, that song it's about adultery. It's wrong, sinful. And I was like, what? I never took it that way. He goes, yeah, he's saying if you can't be with the one you love the one you're with. It's about adultery. And I was like, I never thought of that. And now every time I hear that song, I think of that conversation with this man.
Wow, that's a weird take on the song, I think. I don't think it's about that, but like maybe it is. I don't know. I'd have to ask. Well, I'm not going to ask Dave Crosby. He passed away a few weeks ago.
Yeah, that's a shame.
But so I don't know. Is Graham Nash still around? I don't know.
So anyway, Wanda.
Yeah. Anyway,
is
so
saying,
yes,
she's giving him a parable and give him the kiss off.
Right. So she's convinced him that, in fact, you have to find love where you can, and they begin to kiss. But later in the issue, Steve approaches Wanda to tell her that he's ready to take a chance on love with her and give their budding relationship, let's try it, right? And she replies that she has no idea what he's talking about. In fact, she tells him that his suggestions sound a bit inappropriate. So naturally he's shocked, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but later in the Avengers Disassembled storyline, which came out in 2004 with the Avengers 500 with lots of tie-ins, we learn in fact that there had been no relationship, that Cap's hallucinations and his dreams about Wanda was the result of Wanda's mental breakdown and the leaking out, the spilling out of her magical powers. Although it's never really clear if Steve Rogers perhaps had some latent feelings for Wanda or vice versa. And maybe neither of them had never considered acting on until their emotional states became compromised as a result of what was going on with Wanda. Still, those were pretty romantic panels. And,
right,
and I don't know.
I got to ask, I'm just sorry. I just want to ask you this. So if this was something that Wanda was like, nope, never happened, and it was due to her magical powers leaking out during this whole Avengers Disassembled storyline that led into what was that? House of M, right?
Right. That's right.
Yeah. Then was it really like, maybe it was something deep in Steve that like he had always kind of thought this way, and then her magical powers touched him and he now manifested something that he wanted?
It might have been both. It might have been one or the other. Maybe she had always had a little bit of a crush on him, and somehow it manifested in her warping of reality for him. So I don't know, but they came out in 2006 with a what if book, a what if Avengers Disassembled story, where in fact they did have a relationship and they got married, right? And it was and the relationship was blessed by Magneto, and Steve and Wanda went up against the Avengers, and it was interesting in that story because that whole mental breakdown was because her two children, right, were gone, right? But in the what if book, the children were back, and what she interpreted this was, with all along it had been a premonition that these were the two children that she would have with Steve. So it was a really weird story, and it didn't end well for either Cap or Wanda, but a very interesting take on what might have happened had that relationship proceeded.
Well, I have not read that, but I want to check that out.
All right, what do you got for number 7, Rick?
Number 7, I'm going to go with Connie, like the car Ferrari. I was going to do like a vroom vroom. I don't know. Anyway, she now she was from Captain America Volume 3. She was the love interest for Cap for actually a few years.
Yeah.
And she Mark Waid introduced her because he felt like it was time. At that point he had he had brought back Sharon Carter at the end of volume 1, and then we'll get into that. But then when they relaunched volume 3, they're a little bit together, but then they launched the at the same time, maybe like around issue 5, they launched something, Captain America: Sensible Liberty, and that was with Mark Waid and Ron Garney co-plotting. Ron was doing the art. And at that point, they kind of co-workers in Shield when that happened. So I guess Mark decided, you know what, I need a love interest. And actually, now I think about it, I think Mark did talk about that when we had him on the show. So if anybody wants to go back and listen to that Mark Waid interview, which was amazing, that was in episode 78. So I think he does talk. We do talk to him a little bit about Connie Ferrari, and then so that's who she is, where she came from. So she and Steve dated for some time, right? They were together for maybe like 20 issues or something like that. And she was a criminal defense lawyer, and she occasionally served as the defense counsel for some pretty unsavory characters. So that didn't always go over well with Steve, but she had a very deep distrust of the U.S. government and the military. So when she learns in issue 43 that Captain America had captured her, well, she thought dead brother in the middle of an international conspiracy to conquer the world, and the fact that Captain America was her boyfriend, because she was dating Steve Rogers. She had no idea he was Captain America. The relationship basically ends, right, in a big hurry, and she ends up leaving him a Dear Steve letter, and we actually covered that in episode 99. We did volume 3, number 44, where Cap fights Taskmaster, and it's a really good issue where she as a lawyer is stating her case of why she can't be together with Steve. Dan Jurgens wrote and drew it, and it was a great story. I thought it was done very well with them.
I remember you really loved the way they he as he was reading that letter, they kind of pulled back further and further.
Oh yeah, at the
Remember
end.
that?
Yeah, from the window.
Page? Yeah.
And we had a good time talking with Dan about that, the next episode 100, if anybody wants to check that out. So we learn in issue 49 she ends up moving to Ohio. She opens up a law office after she passes the bar, and it's that final conversation with Connie that eventually brings him back to Sharon. And so that was kind of like a trigger there. Now Connie later goes on to establish Ferrari and Hindell Associates in New York. And she does take up a case on behalf of the Avengers that ends up leading to establishing the Great Lakes Avengers in the first issue of that title. So the Great Lakes Avengers was kind of like a tongue-in-cheek book. We had the Avengers, we had the West Coast Avengers, and then they made something for the middle section of the Great Lakes Avengers,
like Flatman and Big Bertha,
Mr. Immortal.
Right. Yeah.
He was in She-Hulk, by the way.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, I forgot all about that.
Yeah. So anyway, there you go. That's number 7.
Well, that's a great one,
Connie Ferrari.
Yeah, and hey, not all loves work out, right? But as you said, though, in that issue, that's what brings him back to realize that like he can like have a relationship with Sharon, right? Because Connie tells him that like you can't split your life. You can't bifurcate being Steve Rogers and Captain America. You have to decide who you want to be, right? You have to integrate it, right? And he realizes that, and he realizes that, Captain America and Steve Rogers is the same person, and he wants to be with Sharon.
I'm sorry, Bob. I was Googling bifurcate. What the hell is that?
You can't just like separate it.
What is bifurcate?
I guess what I meant is you can't dichotomize.
Is that a real word?
Or
did you just make that up?
That is a real word. Yes, right.
I am
So
totally looking it up right now.
Connie, had a profound effect, right? The breakup with Connie and had a profound effect on Steve's relationships. So
Bifurcate. It is divide into two branches or forks. Interesting. Hey, look at that, everybody. We all learned a new word today.
Wow, fork. That reminds me, I really would like some pie.
Bifurcate.
I'm like a pie fanatic. Zola's the bio fanatic. I'm like a pie fanatic.
Are you really? Because that's like one of my least favorite desserts.
Oh, I love pie. Man.
Oh my God, Bob, we have so little in common. The more I know.
And ivory side by side on my piano. Why can't we? See, I mean, we can make this work. Right?
Okay. I'm a huge Paul McCartney fan. And you just bastardized that. But I do you remember back when on Saturday Night Live, right around 1981, 82, it was the big two on Saturday Night Live at that time was Eddie Murphy and Joe Piscopo.
Right. Yeah.
And Joe Piscopo did an amazing Frank Sinatra.
Yes.
Eddie Murphy did an amazing Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
And so they went ahead and did a version of that song. You
Yes,
remember that?
I do remember that one.
Oh,
yeah.
That was so funny. Yeah. Guys, everybody listening, you go on YouTube and look up Ebony and Ivory, Saturday Night Live, Joe Piscopo and Eddie Murphy. It was hilarious because he's doing his Frank Sinatra, right? And he's like, "You are black and I am white. You're as blind as a bat and I got sight."
Yeah, that's the one.
You're what do you say? You're my amigo, Negro. Let's be friends.
Piscopo was awesome.
Oh, that was
whatever happened to him,
Oh, I don't know. He probably worked out too much. Too many.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, he was a big guy.
He really was.
Yeah.
All right. So, Bob.
Yep.
I just want to point out that I have had Donna Marie Puentes and Connie Ferrari. Now, these are, legitimate women who show up, where people are like, oh, okay. You've had Hilda Zemo and Wanda Maximoff. Please bring some legitimacy here with number 6, Bob.
But let me ask you something, Rick. Are you not intrigued to read the Medusa Effect and to go back and read that What If Avengers Disassembled? If you are, my job here is done.
Oh, touche.
All right. So number 6, this is an exciting one for me, Rick. I really like this one. And this is another one of those ones where you dig in a little bit and you're rewarded, right? So it's my number 6 is Cynthia Glass, or as Cap refers to her, Steve, Cindy. So, we could talk about like, what's her first appearance? And it's a little bit complicated because, she first appears by name in The Adventures of Captain America #1 from 1991, right? But it's believed that the Agent X-13 that we see in the curio shop when Steve goes on that fateful day to receive the super soldier shot and the vital rays, and when Professor Erskine is assassinated, it's believed that was Glass herself as X-13. So, we can debate that, but I think, a lot of people who read the comics think, yeah, that was X-13.
So before you get to that,
all right.
First of all, I sigh because I'm like, okay, really? Because first of all, I love The Adventures of Captain America. I enjoyed that miniseries.
It's a great series.
I'm a huge fan of Kevin Maguire.
Right.
And this was right after that time when he was, on Justice League International, and he is a master of facial expressions. One of these days, I hope to get a cool page from that, page of art, because nice. I love Maguire. But there's been debate on whether or not this is actually in the 616.
Okay.
It has been coming around that it is. Now, when this came out, people were like, no, this isn't, the real origin story of Captain America. This was kind of like an alternate universe. And I think if you went into something like marvelfandom.com, it kind of talked about that. But in the last few years, I have been seeing more and more people saying, no, it actually is part of canon. It is part of 616. So it's up for debate. I would love to have the writer on, Fabian. And I actually asked him like a year and a half ago if he wanted to be on the show, and he gave us some thought, and he was like, you know what? I'm all about moving ahead. I don't want to live in the past. I don't want to, talk about, that 4 issues that I did 20 years ago. So, but I'd love to have him come on to see whether or not was she Agent X-13? Like, did you have that in mind?
Right.
Or whatever. So we'll never know. We'll never know.
Right. Fair enough. Fair enough. So, all right. Well, I think she's an interesting love interest of Cap, and I'll tell you why. So we learn in the 4-part miniseries that The Adventures of Captain America, that Cynthia was an Army intelligence officer assigned to support Project Rebirth. In other words, Steve knew her well before he underwent the super soldier procedure. And I do hope this is canon, because it's such a great story, especially that first issue and a half, right? That, we get that backstory. And I know you love stories as much as I do about pre-super soldier serum Steve.
I do.
Right. And we get such a great window into his personality and character at that time. But in any case, we learn in the 3rd issue of that series that she is, in fact, a double agent called Agent X, who is working for the Nazis in their efforts to steal the secrets of Operation Rebirth. And in fact, they want to know what that extra little oomph is that Erskine came up with that was lost with his death. It's the same thing that everybody was trying to figure out at that time. But in that last issue,
everybody was always after a little extra oomph.
A little oomph. Are we all? Really?
Yeah. At the end of the day.
At the end of the day, right? So, but it's in that last issue, just as Steve is nearly broken by her betrayal as a double agent, she has a change of heart. And so she passes Bucky the master keys to the prison where Bucky and Steve are being held. And it allows Bucky to escape and commandeer a tank. And just at that most dire moment in Cap's battle with the Red Skull, she throws Steve his shield so he can defend himself. And this, of course, prompts the Red Skull to shoot her dead, but it allows Cap to triumph and escape with Bucky. And on the way home, Cap laments that he never had the chance to tell Cindy he loved her. And I love this part, Rick, and I had to go back and check, right, because I wasn't sure. But Bucky tells Cap that she told him that she loved Steve as well. Aww. And I went back, and in fact, she didn't. She didn't say that, but Bucky wanted to comfort his friend, and he told him that. And I thought that was pretty cool.
You don't think it happened off panel?
It might have. It might have. I don't know why they wouldn't have included it. It would have been cool, but in any case, I like that moment, of Bucky comforting his friend. So we could just set that to bed, right? Okay, maybe that's not canon, right? Maybe that's not 616. But Rick, there's more. Wait,
what?
There's more. Yes, there's more. In the first issue of the 4-issue miniseries, Steve Rogers Super Soldier from 2010. You remember that one?
I do. I love that. I love that uniform.
A little Ed Brubaker. I do too, man. If I was going to do cosplay, I thought I'd look pretty good in that. I could wear that to the grocery store.
I would be the pre-serum, Steve.
The pre-serum? Nice. Anyway, in this first issue of this miniseries, Steve is on an assignment, Now he's Commander Rogers, right? And he's surveilling Professor Erskine's grandson. And he sees what looks to be Cynthia Glass. So we read a bit more in issue 2 about his relationship with Cynthia during World War II and how she died saving his life. It's here that he describes her as the first love I ever lost. It turns out, spoiler alert, that the woman he's met isn't really Cynthia, though she retains some of her memories of their relationship way back when. She's really a life model decoy that was created by Machine Smith, and she ends up helping Steve defeat him, although in the end she's destroyed. So yes, right. It's an unusual pick, Rick, but I love the fact that he called her out as the first love I ever lost. So it has to count, man.
All right, you got me convinced. That is it deserves to be in the top 10, and here we are at number 6. Great job, Bob.
All right, what do you got for number 5, Rick?
Before we get into number 5, Bob, let's do a halftime show.
Nice.
right? Let's do a halftime show. That
Hope I don't have a wardrobe malfunction.
you know, let's get to those honorable mentions now. Yeah, we don't want to keep people guessing.
Yeah.
Right.
We don't
Oh,
want
by the
people
way,
leaving at halftime.
yeah. By the way, I want to tell you something. I meant to mention this in the beginning when I gave you my hello and the Love Boat theme. There was more than one reason, Bob, that I picked out the Love Boat theme, and
Really?
it ties in with something to do with this top 10 list.
Okay.
I will reveal it after
Oh my
we
goodness.
get
Now
through.
I have to stick around.
All right, so Bob, for runner-ups, who do you want to start with?
Whew. What about Holly? That one fascinates me because I remember reading that one and thinking, attractive. I think the term is, no, I can't say
that. Is it an abbreviation, acronym of some sort?
It's an acronym of some sort. Yeah. Starts with an M and ends with an ILF. Yes. Yes.
Is she on a shelf?
Yeah. MILF on the shelf. I said it. Oh my. Yes. I thought, well, I think that was dangled out there at the time.
Oh, no pun intended.
As who knows, right? I mean, interesting.
Yeah, Mark Gruenwald was like, hey, here's somebody who's, attracted to Steve. Who wouldn't be? Right?
Yeah.
And
right.
A single mom. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Gru did her dirty by killing her off in a horrible way.
Well, that's right. Did she die? I remember she being in a coma.
Yeah, I think she died.
She eventually die?
Yeah. I think so, yeah.
Yeah. What was the kid's name again? I can't remember the kid's name.
Oh gosh.
It was some weird name like Ram or something.
It was Ram.
Was
it? Totally. It was
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Ram. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, so I think what Catman had a comment about it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. He said, I always thought Ram's mom, Holly Ridley, would have been a great love interest. And she might have been. It's one of those what ifs, right? In fact, it could have been a what if. What if Cap hooked up with Ram's mom?
That's right. Yeah, we actually covered the end to her with remember the episode where Jason Olsen came on and we did the last Mark Gruenwald issue?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Oh yes.
Yeah. It was Captain America 443.
Yeah.
And Jason Olsen came on, John Waller Sewell came on. It was in episode 98. And that's when he goes by, Cap realizes he's dying and he goes by to say goodbye to Ram. Ram's sitting out on the stoop of his house.
Yeah.
Which is apparently empty.
Yeah.
Because and he's a teenager.
Because everybody's sitting out on the stoop.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, you're no hero. You couldn't, no one could help my mom. She got, I don't know. She got hit
by a car.
I think it was hijacked by a bus full of penguins or something. And
oh, she got shot. she got carjacked and shot in the head. That was it.
Yeah. I think Gru was just in a bad place.
What is up with that? Right?
I do.
That was kind of a shocking turn of events for poor Ram. And, Steve's looking for a little validation and he didn't get any from Ram.
Yeah.
All
right. My honorable mention, I'm going to go with Black Widow. I'm going to go with Natasha Romanoff. So, I mean, she did make it to the top 5 on Facebook, right?
Yeah,
she ended up getting 5% of the votes. And she it was an interesting character. Now, I will say, Black Widow's been around.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Well, not in that way. Yeah.
No, she got around in that way. She really did. I mean, she was a romantic interest with Hawkeye for a while.
Yeah.
Then she was with Daredevil, Matt Murdock for a while. In fact, Daredevil, much like Captain America and the Falcon, became, the series. It used to be called Daredevil and Black Widow.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So so she's had her share of different boyfriends, we'll call them.
Paramours. Yeah.
Yes. Lovers. I always think of on Saturday Night Live. The was it Will Ferrell and I can't remember her name right now. Um, they always they had a recurring
In the
characters
hot
about
tub.
yeah yeah yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, lover.
Yeah. Whenever I get in the hot tub, I fall into that role. So yeah.
Do you?
Yeah. That's why my wife made me get rid of the one we had.
uh, so but I loved Ed Brubaker's ability to write a series of Captain America without Steve Rogers.
Yeah.
Like that, just, and how did he do that? He elevated the Bucky Barnes character. He elevated, Sam Wilson's character, elevated Sharon Carter's character. He elevated Natasha Romanoff. So that was, a good time as far as seeing her and Bucky together in a romantic relationship.
Yeah.
And we had a couple of comments on the Facebook page. Grant Ball, who, one of our longtime patrons, he wrote, my vote for Widow is especially for her and Bucky. No real reason for it other than I liked them together. Yeah, and I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then another patron of the show, he wrote, Aaron Paul, I think Natasha should be an honorable mention because of her time as Bucky's main love interest when he was slinging the shield. Hence why she earned my vote.
Yeah.
So there you go, Grant. There you go, Aaron. We agree with you. Honorable mention.
I think, we did open it up to all caps. Not the kind on your keyboard, but all Captain Americas. And
why are you always yelling at me, Bob?
I'm just trying to straighten you out, Rick.
No, the all caps,
Yeah. But the thing about I think is a powerful thing with Bucky and Natasha is that they understood each other, right? They both had a very turbulent, dark background that they were trying to make up for. And I think that was a really interesting thing about the way that Brubaker wrote their relationship and what made it so compelling, right? That reason, I think she definitely deserves more than an honorable mention. And if we had sort of branched out to more than just Steve Rogers, I definitely think she should have been in the running.
Well, I'm sorry, Bob. Were you not paying attention? We did branch out to more than Steve Rogers.
We did.
You didn't branch out.
Okay. You're right.
So why didn't you include her in your top 10 then, Bob? How did Zola make it instead of her? Zemo. Sorry, not Zola. Yeah. I get my Z's mixed up.
So happens a lot to people. Yeah.
So why Zemo?
Everybody's read volume 5 of Captain America, and nobody's read the Medusa Effect. So I'm just about shilling books that nobody's read.
Wow.
Yeah.
The truth comes out.
I'm trying to drum up business for.
All right. Who else is an honorable mention for you?
All right, Misty Knight. So another interesting character, right? Sam, we haven't, obviously in the vote, Misty Knight was in there, and so was Layla, and we both discussed why Layla was probably a bad choice for Sam. But Misty has taken on a bigger role in Sam's first series as Captain America, and in the Symbol of Truth, she has a substantial role, and I like their dynamic, right? I mean, she doesn't take any guff from him. She's a very independent woman, and but she's an equal. Right. And they treat each other like equals. So it's a mature adult relationship. And I'm really interested to see how that goes. So Aaron Paul wrote, for Misty, her time and relationship with Sam hasn't been fleshed out enough yet, in my opinion, but it's worth a mention. And that's why we're going to give her an honorable mention.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I like what you pointed out, the fact that they're equals. That certainly is a dynamic that's important. Some of these love interests only know the civilian character. They don't know the other half. And so it's interesting when they do know and they're equals as well. They're not just a civilian themselves.
Yeah. It's funny. I was having this conversation with my wife last night about
now, is she an equal or is
she surpasses me in every way.
Right.
But we were talking about
she doesn't listen to this, Bob. You don't have to worry about it.
You never know, right? She may be getting a summary digest of what's said. She used to be an Intel. So, we were talking about this show, right? And talking about the differences of how like Cap's love interests were written in the 60s and early 70s and, and how it's changed over time, how it's evolved. and how perhaps back then stories were written for maybe a younger audience than now.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think, we always talk about representation, and it's important for people to see, people like themselves. But I also think it's important for people to see like mature adult relationships.
Mm-hmm.
We learn vicariously through what we see and what we read. And so, I like to see relationships where the characters are their own people, right? They're three-dimensional people, and they're having issues and working through them. And that's one of the things I like about the Misty Knight Sam Wilson relationship.
Yeah, and I think most of us like Misty Knight over Layla any day of the week. Layla Taylor.
Twice on Tuesday. Yeah.
Yeah. Now Layla, she gets a, she gets a little bit of a bad rap too. I mean, she was a character, a product of that time period.
Sure. Yeah.
So she was written like an angry black lady, right at the cusp of civil rights
Yeah.
and women's lib
The
at
activist
at the same time. And so, she kind of was written a certain way. Maybe it was cliche, but it certainly did bring drama to the character of Sam Wilson, right? It wasn't, this everything's great, love, romantic relationship. No, she had a lot of sass,
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, sass.
and so there was a lot of conflict with her. She had, sometimes, a little rage, but she's kind of moved on. I think so. She became, I want to say, I read somewhere she became like this investigative journalist.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And so she developed, and I think that was, in the 90s and the 2000s, right? She kind of became a little bit more fleshed out than this, young, angry black lady. So I think she totally deserves to be an honorable mention.
All right. All right. So we're going to jump back into the final five, Rick?
I think we should. I think we should. So should I go ahead and do five?
Yeah. Yeah. Do it.
All right. So for number five on the top 10 romantic love interests of Captain America, I'm going back. I'm going way, way back to Captain America Comics #1, all the way back in 1941. I'm going to go with Elizabeth Ross, known as Betty, aka Golden Girl. And she was Golden Girl starting with Captain America Comics 66. But still the same person. And sometimes people hear Betty Ross, they think of General Thunderbolt Ross's daughter, which is Elizabeth Ross Banner. But this is Elizabeth Betty Ross. And also to kind of bring it full circle, General Thunderbolt Ross is the nephew of Betty Ross, so they are kind of related.
Yeah.
Huh. But anyway, Betty appeared in a lot of early Golden Age Cap comics. So actually, she appeared in I want to say 27 of the original Golden Age run, and some of the Cap stories featured in Marvel Mystery Comics. So she's been around for a while. And then there were 16 issues before William Naslund took over as Cap in issue 49. Well, if you're going to go by the retcon anyway. And she was typically portrayed as a government agent. She worked on undercover missions as like a journalist. And so she changed her name to Betsy Ross instead of Betty Ross, starting in Captain America Comics 61. And she wasn't just a bit player in most of these stories. She often played like a pivotal role in the plots. And so during that time, she was linked romantically with Steve Rogers, and who, sometimes there was a lot of friction between that and the competition with Sergeant Mike Duffy for Ross's affections. And there were sometimes other suitors as well. Now, she, of course, was not aware that Steve was in fact Captain America. So at one point, she and Steve were engaged, only for her to switch camps and promised Sergeant Duffy to marry him instead. And I think it was because he was a sergeant.
Well, I can see that.
That's pretty fickle.
Yeah.
Of course, by the next story in that same issue, which was Captain America Comics 18, Betty was back to being in Steve's arms again. Now, Jeff Mace, according to the retcon, took over as Captain America starting in issue 59, and then he remained as Cap all the way through Captain America's Weird Tales 74. And she was featured in a couple stories from the 50s relaunch of Cap, who we now know was William Burnside. So, of course, as we learned in Captain America Patriot miniseries from 2010, she continued to serve alongside Jeff Mace's Captain America as Golden Girl. And then they eventually gave up the uniforms and they settled down in a small town called Glendale, New York, where Jeff became the editor of the town newspaper and Betsy became a school teacher. And we saw Jeff Mace pass away recently, right? In Captain America. We just covered that a few episodes in episode 120, where he passed away in Cap 285. And then last we see of Betty is actually in the one-shot Ant-Man Last Days, which came out in 2015, where we get to see her final days spent as the ex-superhero, ex-supervillain Florida retirement community, Valhalla Villas, run by Madeline Joyce, who was formerly Miss America. So it seems weird that such an important character was completely retconned out of Steve Rogers' life when he revived back, in Avengers 4 in 1963. Because Betty had been so central to many of his and Bucky's adventures, as well as the adventures of William Naslund and Fred Davis, and then later Jeff Mace. So she was also someone who was likely an important role model for young girls during the World War II era. Just throwing that out there. But
yeah,
anyway, I thought it was important to have her here because she touched. She was with Steve Rogers and then a little bit of William Naslund and then Jeff Mace. I think she totally makes it into the top 5 romantic love interests.
Well, it makes sense. And again, it always surprised me. And we talked about this like in the 50s, we covered the 1950s Cap, that like she just completely disappeared, right? And of course, it was great to see that story in Captain America Patriot, and her and Jeff Mace settle down and live their life, and presumably, raise children. I don't know if they ever had children, but, and then we see in that Ant-Man Last Days, she gets de-aged for like a day or something, along with all the superheroes and supervillains living in the Valhalla Villas. And it was neat to see her, doing her Golden Girl thing again. But she was such an important character in the Golden Age and for all the Caps. And it's just, it's crazy that she never really made the jump into the modern era and the Silver Age and up. But just by virtue of, longevity, and she definitely rates a mention here.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the ones that we've tried to make it on here have been, some have been just a brief little tryst or something, but some of them had some longevity, like a Connie Ferrari and like, Golden Girl. So that brings us to number 4, Bob.
Yeah.
Talk about longevity.
Right. Yeah. So, it has to be Margaret Peggy Carter, right? And I'm talking about the comics, Margaret Peggy Carter, because I do think, and a lot of love for Peggy Carter happens to be, a little bleed over from the cinematic universe. And who doesn't love, the cinematic universe's Peggy and Steve romance? But,
and Haley Atwell.
And of course, Haley Atwell. Right. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, yeah. So we get a brief glimpse of Captain America's ill-fated World War II romance with Peggy in issue 75 of Tales of Suspense. And, it's just a brief, remembrance, and that name of Cap's wartime love is never mentioned. And then 2 issues later in Tales of Suspense 77, we learn more about this World War II romance. And again, though, the name of this woman is never mentioned. And it's not until 7 years later in 1973, when Captain America 161 and 162 hit the stands, that we are again acquainted with the story of Peggy Carter, who is now committed to the Lost Souls Asylum and Rest Home under the professional care of one Dr. Faustus. You know, it's in that story that we learn that Sharon Carter is Peggy's younger sister, both of them daughters of Harrison and Amanda Carter. And we covered that story arc in I think episode 51. You know, it's also revealed in this in this 2-issue story what Tales of Suspense 77 led us to believe, that Cap never knew Peggy's real name during World War II, which is kind of odd if you think about it for two folks in love.
We joked about that. I think we covered Tales of Suspense 79 through 81 back in episode 12. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a part where Steve's looking out a window at nighttime.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I can only think of her.
What's her name?
Yeah. And he kept referring to her as her.
Right.
Her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then and I think we also pointed out that somewhere later when Sharon is introduced, he doesn't know Sharon's name either, and he keeps referring to her as her.
Yes.
And I was like, come on, Stan and Jack. I mean, like, come on, guys.
They're writing a lot of stuff.
Please.
Well, you know, in these stories, he only refers to her as Mademoiselle. And, you know, and she never knew his real name, right? She only knew him, you know, with his cowl on. So, you know, that's Cap. So, you know, we see one of these early World War II adventures with Cap and Mademoiselle. And that was told in the 2011 one-shot Captain America and the First 13. It's a title that lets us know that Peggy also used the moniker Agent 13 well before Sharon. You know, harkening back to Tales of Suspense 77, we're reminded that Peggy suffered amnesia as a result of this explosion during the waning days of World War II. And when she eventually recovered, only then did she learn of Cap's alleged demise in May of 1945. This news, we're told, caused her to mentally shut down and dress herself as a widow. And her family and doctors never told her that Cap supposedly reappeared in the 50s for fear that, like, it would shock her so much that her fragile mind would just, you know, collapse. Anyway, it proved that was the anti-communist Cap, and then he too disappeared. So, you know, maybe, you know, it was the best thing after all. So it's in Captain America 162 that she finally learns Cap's alive, but alas, too much time has passed for these crazy kids. And also Cap is at this time canoodling her baby sister. So, you know, over the years, of course, she slowly gets over Cap and comes to grip with her, let's just say, advanced age. And Steve has to eventually tell her of his involvement with Sharon. That was in issue 179. And eventually, you know, Peggy bounces back and she has a relationship with Gabe Jones. And, you know, things seem to be going well. And Peggy goes on to play a really important role with S.H.I.E.L.D. and with the Avengers. And she eventually grows old and somewhat senile and eventually passes away. And we see her funeral in Captain America #1. This is volume 6 from 2011. Mm-hmm. But like the other Carter, her erstwhile sister, and later we learn her niece, she doesn't stay dead forever, right? And in issue 19 of volume 9 of Captain America, it's revealed that she too is alive again, thanks to the sentient cosmic cube Kobik, who has brought her back and de-aged her. So it appears, you know, we've been talking about the new Sentinel of Liberty series, and Peggy has a big role to play in that series. So it's interesting to see where that's going to lead. You know, romantically speaking, who knows? She's looking pretty good, Rick.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, wasn't it in the last volume 10, the coats where they brought her back and like de-aged her or something?
Yeah, volume 9.
Oh, volume
9. Yeah. Was that 9?
I don't know. I think I have it in my system as volume 10, but who knows?
Who knows? Yeah.
It's the coats.
Yeah, it was definitely the coats run. Yeah.
Yeah, but didn't they also say like she has been around lots, like she was like part of these witches,
the Daughters of Liberty.
Yeah, and that there was due to some magic, like she had been around a lot longer than when she met Steve in World War II. Like she was back like the Puritan ages or something.
Yeah, well, I don't know if she went back that far, but yeah, she's definitely been, which is hard to square with you know, Harrison and Adele Carter, her parents or whoever. But anyway, yeah, they never really thoroughly explained that.
Yeah.
But again, I like to point out that she's looking pretty good. So
that is true.
it's a very different story than the cinematic universe story. But who knows where to lead, Rick?
Yep. Yeah.
If we want to make things complicated and interesting and twists and turns, some of that cinematic universe flavor might leak over into what's going on now in Cap's life.
Maybe. I want to see more Peggy Carter, Captain Carter. I want to see more of that.
Oh, I do too. Yeah, I do too.
All right, so let's get to number 3, Bob. Now, I think we all knew who the top 3 were going to be, right? So in the Facebook group, it was number 3, Bernie, number 2, Sharon, number 1, Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we don't have it that way, Bob.
Yeah, the order is a little bit different.
The order is a little different. Let's go to number 3, and it is Rachel Layton, aka Diamondback.
Wow.
Yes, number 3. Now, she's certainly a fan favorite, obviously, right? She got voted number 1 in our Facebook group, but we gave it some serious thought, and we're ranking her as number 3. Now, she was introduced back in Captain America 310 on the heels of Steve Rogers' relationship with Bernie, oddly enough. And her and Steve and Rachel's relationship turned out to be very different kind of relationship, right? So Bernie was this glass blower and everyday girl next door. Rachel was a criminal and was taught the ropes by none other than Brock Rumlow, who is AKA Crossbones, and the Savage Crims gang back then. And then she later worked as one of the original members of the Serpent Society. And that's where she became the character Diamondback. Now, after her first confrontation with Cap while on assignment to find and kill MODOK, she was instantly smitten by the Sentinel of Liberty. Now, many issues later, when Viper, remember when she staged a takeover of the Serpent Society from Sidewinder?
Oh, I never forget a Viper story.
Yes. Well, Diamondback, she reached out to Cap for help, and he came with his team. I think it was Nomad and D-Man and Sam and so on, and helped defeat Viper. So after that, she abandoned the Serpent Society, and the relationship really began to heat up during the Bloodstone hunt. Now, she was trying to get on the good side, like she was trying to turn a leaf, because she really wanted to do it so that Cap would have an interest in her. And so during the Bloodstone hunt, which was issues 357 through 362, and by the way, we covered that all the way back in episode 3. If anybody wants to listen to that, that was a fun story. But she eventually kind of wore Cap down, I think, a little bit. And he warmed up to the idea of a reformed Rachel. Although he was never entirely comfortable with the idea of the two being a couple. It was a lot of fun where they went out on their first date in issue 371, and we covered that in episode 67. That was a fun story where Rachel and Steve go out, and you get to see an awkward Steve outside of the uniform, and the two of them kind of flirting together and so on. But one always had the feeling that it just wasn't going to work out, right? Rachel always seemed to get pulled back into the criminal life and her old associates, and Steve never really seemed committed to the idea of a romance with Diamondback as much as maybe being a friend or a mentor.
Friend zone. Yeah.
And now, although I will say this, in volume 4, which was during the 4-issue Robert Kirkman story, which was tied around the same time as Avengers Disassembled, it did feature Diamondback. And the very last issue of volume 4 ended with Steve suggesting to Rachel that they go get a room.
That's right. I remember we talked about that at the time.
Yeah. and which seemed really out of character. So we cover that story arc in episode 97 if anyone wants to check that out.
Right.
But that was a lot of fun. So I think Rachel totally deserves to be in the top 3, but she's number 3 for me because it really wasn't quite a true love relationship between the two of them.
Yeah. It's funny, Rick, part of me thinks like, oh, well, we've got the top 3, Sharon and Bernie and Rachel, right? That's what people voted for, top 3, different order. But, how much of it is like, who was the love interest when you were really, growing up reading comic? And another is like, though, like, what do you look for, right? In a love interest, right? Some folks really like the opposites attract, right? Mm-hmm. Some folks are looking for, the girl next door, and some folks are looking for perhaps, somebody who is, a powerful equal in their own right. So I think it may be a little bit of both, at play here in the way that different people order these top 3.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, Bob, because I think all 3 of these have a different personality, a different character that brings into it. And I think let's face it, the writers for these series got that. Like, we can't just replicate it and do something, the same to replace somebody similar. Let's do something different, good for them. And they nailed it. Obviously we all feel the same way. These are top 3. And a couple comments in the Facebook group. Brian Nichols wrote, Diamondback. Opposites attract for Steve. I'd like their interaction and the date issue which was 371. And I apologize, Costas. I'm gonna probably mispronounce your last name, but Vlaco Giannis. He wrote Rachel without question. So definitely a lot of people out there who wanted to see Rachel as our top number 1. Sorry, everybody. Number 3. Yeah. All right. So we got for number 2, Bob. It's coming down to Sharon and Bernie.
Yeah.
Who's it going to be? Who's number 2?
Well, Rick, this is a tough one for me. Really, this I wrestled with this. I laid in bed at night thinking about this. This was a hard one for me, but I did go with Bernie. And now Bernie's number 1 in my heart. Number 1 in my heart. But, I think, well, we'll talk about why maybe she comes in at number 2. So, Bernie first appeared in Captain America 247. She's a woman of Jewish heritage. She's renowned as one of the most talented glass blowers in the New York Metroplex. And she's the former owner and operator of Rosenthal's Glass Menagerie in Greenwich Village, New York, along with her business partner, Annie Brennan. So she's like an accomplished woman, right? But not a spy, not a criminal, a criminal, right? She's
not a South American
revolutionary, right? She's just somebody you might meet at a coffee shop or at the library or, at church or something, right? So,
or synagogue, Bob.
Yeah.
Synagogue.
Or a synagogue, right? Because she's Jewish, right? So she's leased apartment in the building where Steve Rogers lives. The brownstone owned by Anna Kappelbaum at 569 Lehman Place in Brooklyn Heights. And so Steve and Bernie start off as neighbors, right? They've got some mutual friends with guys who live in the building, and eventually they become friends. And eventually they enter into a more romantic relationship. In issue 276, Bernie realizes Steve is Captain America, and they continue their relationship, even though Steve, initially tries to end it to keep her from harm, but she's not having any of it, Rick. She gives him a big speech, and it's really a great series of panels. In issue 294, Bernie proposes to Steve, and almost to his surprise, he says yes. Now, eventually, Bernie and Anne are forced to close their glass blowing shop, and because the lease was raised, and this was in issue 309, right? And she begins studying to go to law school, and then they noticeably start growing apart. And again, it's very real, right? That's what happens to people when their lives take them in different directions. So I appreciate that sort of realism in this relationship. So in issue 317, she moves out of her place at Lehman Place, and she heads off to Ohio to enter law school. And Steve ends up missing her farewell party because he's off with Hawkeye fighting the Death Throes. Remember, Oddball and Crossfire, Bombshell, Ringleader, and a couple others. And when he returns early in the morning, he finds a Dear Steve letter Bernie has left for him in her empty apartment. Another Dear Steve letter.
Well, not another. This is the original.
Well, this is the original, right? Yeah, but so poor Steve gets a lot of these Dear Steve letters.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's better than like a Dear Bob letter.
Well, that is a good point. So they keep in touch, and and Steve ends up visiting Bernie in Ohio, but eventually they drift further and further out of each other's orbits, and Steve increasingly in the comics begins to refer to her as his former fiance and confidant. Now she continues to show up in stories from time to time, but in a short story by Roger Stern in issue 600, this is after Cap is apparently killed right on the steps of the courthouse. This is that issue that has a lot of mini stories in it. And this one, we learn that she never stopped thinking about him or loving him. And she had actually been there in the crowd when Steve was apparently shot and killed, because she wanted him to see a friendly face in that jeering crowd. And later she was Bucky Barnes's legal counsel when he was put on trial for his crimes as a Winter Soldier. So, I love Bernie. I think she was, in my mind, she's number one. And I love that character. And gosh, I'd love to see more of her actually in future issues.
I think she could totally be argued for number one. And I think it goes back to like what you said, right? Well, like, who was the person that we were reading comics? Right. Bernie, talk about longevity. She was in Steve's life for 60, 70 issues. And that's a long time. Now, maybe not all of them as, a romantic interest or, whatever, but a good portion of them. And, she was the first romantic love interest of Steve that I had. And, when she found out that Steve was Captain America, that was so cool, and she was like, nope, like you said, she's not having it, right? Like, we're sticking together and we're going to get through this. And then it was so fun when Jack Monroe showed up, she took him in. When Arnie showed up, she took him in. When Steve had to go off to do Captain America stuff, she understood. They, I think it was that one of the issues we covered was the American Christmas, with the Black Crow.
Yep.
And that was in episode 63.
Yeah.
Because it was Captain America 292. I remember the two of them walking down the street and they're getting gifts, and she mentioned something about kids, and he was like, what?
Yeah.
And, so we got to see, and so it was introduced with Roger Stern as the writer. Then J.M. DeMatteis, I think, just took it to a whole new level.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Mark Gruenwald came on, it started to slowly fizzle out. Now, I know somebody in the group had mentioned, oh, well, Mark Gruenwald, I guess, didn't like Bernie. I don't know about that, because people sometimes forget that Mark Gruenwald was the editor for J.M. DeMatteis.
Right. Yeah.
So he was involved in all of those stories when Bernie was getting fleshed out, and so on. So, I think I wouldn't have been upset if Bernie was number one, but that's not how it worked out.
So how about we had some comments, Rick, didn't we?
Oh yeah, we did. Grant Ball, he wrote, I really liked Bernie because she's not involved in the superhero world. With how down to earth Steve is, I've long felt he'd do better with a normal person, and Bernie is the best of those love interests by far.
Interesting. I think he nailed something there, though, Rick. Right? I mean, Connie called Steve out on this, that he couldn't live two lives, right? He had to integrate them and pick which one was going to be dominant. And And I think this was hard for him. And I think this relationship was doomed to fizzle out because of that. And that was maybe some of what was interesting in Grunwald's, working Bernie out of the place, out of the way, was that it had to be resolved. Right. The only other way this could have gone is for them to have gotten married and, and had a family. And that probably wouldn't have been that interesting. Because that's where it was headed. Right. So,
yeah, no, totally.
Yeah. So,
there was another comment there, Bob.
Oh yeah, Catman. He wrote that the best would be all three of Cap's main love interests combined into one character. But I have to pick Bernie as my personal fave because I agree with Kirby and Simon that Cap is supposed to be an everyman we can relate to. So here's my rankings. Bernie, regular person capable of having a relationship with Steve that us regular folk can relate to. Able to be strong and independent without being portrayed as a cardboard character. Always liked the fact that she was a glassblower and that she was Jewish. All good points.
Yeah, it was a total, compliment to Steve, as far as some differences and diversity from what he was. So I wouldn't say, opposites like a Diamondback, but it certainly wasn't something like, oh, someone who was a mirror image of Steve at all. All right, Bob. Right. Yeah. Well, I guess there's no surprise. Number one is Sharon Carter.
Oh my gosh, you caught me off guard.
Yeah. So it's clear that ever since her first nameless appearance, as we talked about before in Tales of Suspense 75, the relationship between Sharon Carter and Steve Rogers was an important part of the Captain America mythos, even if an occasionally an awkward part. So besides lamenting the loss of Bucky in the late 60s and early 70s, and oh my God, did we get enough of that?
Yeah.
Steve's private mental life was largely consumed with his love for Sharon. They occasionally bickered, which not unusual for, a two-career couple, as you have pointed out. But I don't think anyone expected what happened at the conclusion of the National Force story that concluded with Sharon under the mind control of Dr. Faustus incinerating herself in issue 237. I have no idea what Chris Claremont and Roger McKenzie were thinking. They weren't long on the book. I don't know what prompted them to come onto the book for the brief time that they were and like, hey, let's kill Sharon Carter. But, this apparent death of Sharon Carter was quite a shock, not just to Steve, but to many of the readers as well. But, hey, it's comics. Life moves on. And sure, Steve, he struggled a little bit with Sharon's death. There was this manipulator that used a vision of her self-immolation against Cap in issue 242. And then Peggy was blaming him for it. But still, eventually Steve did move on, which actually happened pretty quickly because he met Bernie Rosenthal 5 issues later in 247. And then, of course, we talked about eventually, Rachel Diamondback. And we barely hear the name of Sharon Carter mentioned again. So it went that way for a long time. And it seemed like she was truly dead and gone. But again, it's comics. And nearly 200 issues later, Mark Waid began writing Captain America in the 1990s. And he took the unexpected step of revealing that Sharon was in fact still alive. And we covered the story in podcast episode 15, which was Cap issues 445 through 448. And this was a resurrection that was embraced by a lot of fans, including yours truly, and including writer Ed Brubaker, who suggested that, he would have revived her during his run if Waid hadn't already done it. So Sharon obviously played a huge role in Brubaker's run in volumes 5 and 6, which we talked about. I mean, it doesn't get much bigger than she shot Cap in issue 25 and apparently killed him while under the mind control of Dr. Faustus. I gotta tell you, that Dr. Faustus,
he's everywhere.
He's messed up Sharon quite a bit.
He's also very effective.
Yeah.
I mean, if I had some psychiatric issues, I'd see him. He
I don't know why you
very
would.
good at his job.
Yeah. So, you know, at least for a time, there in Ed Brubaker's run, it also appeared that she was carrying Steve's child. So there was that. And then a substantial number of Cap storylines that occurred since Wade took that unanticipated step wouldn't have been nearly the same without Sharon's involvement. So since, you know, Ed Brubaker's run, Sharon has increasingly taken on a more central and less antagonistic role in Steve's life. Let's face it, Mark Wade, she was very antagonistic, right? I
He
mean,
sure was argumentative. Yes.
yeah,
Gosh.
they were combative, and because you know I guess Mark Wade had a writer that way because she was mad that she was presumed dead. No one ever came to look for her, you know, and that she thought that was, you know, BS. And so she had some anger issues, you know, because she went through a tough time, you know, off the grid. So yeah, I could see, you know, that, but in Brubaker's one, you know, that was a lot more fleshed out, right? Like she became, you know, much more three-dimensional. And then in volume 7, which was the Rick Remender run with John Romita Jr. when they went to Zola's, you know, Dimension Z, which by the way, we're going to be covering issue 2 of that story here shortly. You know, I don't want to spoil anything, but you know, Steve was still deeply in love with her when she came back from Dimension Z. And, you know, he was aged at that time, but then, you know, when he regained his youthful vitality at the end of the Secret Empire story, you know, he remained madly in love with her. And then in the current series, you know, she's recently been brought back by Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing, as we discussed recently in our discussion with them. You know, they recognize that, you know, she's often Steve's emotional anchor in a storm. So, you know, for all of those reasons, she has to be number 1 on our list.
Well, I agree. I mean, just the weight of history, the weight of the mythos. She has been Cap's main love interest for years, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And it's like a bad penny you can't get rid of. That may be too strong, but she's been there, and I do think Brubaker did a much better job making her more of a three-dimensional character. Especially that after Steve was shot and presumably killed, that back half of volume 5, there was a lot of a lot of panels devoted to Sharon, and Sharon out of her jumpsuit, right? Sharon in well, that's Sharon in civilian clothes, right? Sharon at her house or her parents, estate or whatever it was. And, just a lot more about Sharon. But, Sharon is still, the thing that kind of bugs me about Sharon. Can I say this?
Of course you can. Yeah. It's your show too, dude.
She's still a little bit of a two-dimensional character, right? I mean, what do we know about Sharon? Like, do we know who her friends are? Do we know, does she have hobbies?
She's committed to her job.
Right. That's what I mean, though, right? She's always been, since the 60s, always been a company woman. And that's interesting, but I would like to, I hope Lansing and Kelly dig a bit deeper into her character, and we get to learn a little bit more about her as a person, like we did about, Bernie, or even to some extent Diamondback.
All right. I don't think they're going to do that because I think they have a lot of other things they want to cover in the series. But let me ask you this.
Okay.
Would you pick up a Sharon Carter miniseries?
Yeah, I probably would. Yeah, I would. I think it'd be interesting if there was an attempt to really expand on her backstory a little bit more, and a little bit more about her as a person, as opposed to just a professional angle. I mean, that's obviously important, right? That's the adventure stuff, but it would be interesting to know, does she have friends other than Steve and Sam and, Bucky and the normal crowd? And,
All right. Alana Smith, if you're listening, I'll be sending you my pitch in a few weeks for the Sharon Carter miniseries.
There you go. It could be a hit, right? I mean, there's a lot of maybe an audience out there for a Sharon Carter. I mean, Maria Hill has, a bit compromised over the years and her behavior, but maybe Sharon might be interesting.
Yeah. I want Adam Hughes to be my artist.
Fair enough. Yeah, that would be good. Yeah.
All right. Or you know what? Hey, Kevin McGuire, I don't think you're doing anything right now.
There you go.
He's doing commissions, but I don't think he's on a regular book right now. So I'll do Kevin McGuire. He draws a pretty woman.
Yeah, he does. He
yeah.
does. Hey, we had some comments though, right?
Oh yeah, about Sharon. Yeah. So Adam Rubenstein, he voted his top 3 were Sharon, Bernie, Diamondback. Hey, he got the same 3 we did. Good job, Adam.
Yeah, he sure did. Nice job. All right, Aaron Paul, he wrote, I think Natasha, he did say, he commented earlier, and we mentioned it, that he thought Natasha should be an honorable mention. And of course, he likes Misty because of her time with Sam, even though he thought that should be fleshed out a little bit more. But he said his number 1 is Sharon. She and Steve give me a Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn vibe. Together forever, just not ever getting married.
I like that, Aaron.
Except that one issue, right, where they were married and had kids.
Yeah, but I totally agree. I think it's a good vibe, good call by you. Yeah. And then Tom Liscord, he wrote, reading current run, and no doubt in my feeble mind, Sharon is the one. My first issue happened to be 114, so there's that too. So yeah, there was plenty of votes for Sharon Carter. So anyway, that's our top 10.
Beautiful.
Yeah, just a real quick recap. We had number 10, Hilda Zemo. What? Number 9, Donna Marie Puentes.
See?
Number 8, Wanda Maximoff.
I like it.
Maximoff. We had number 7, Connie Ferrari. Number 6, Cynthia Glass. Number
half empty, half full.
Number 5, we had Betty Ross, aka Golden Girl, aka Maud. Number 4, we have Peggy Carter. Chip chip diddly doo. I was waiting for you to do that.
Pip pip diddly doo.
That's what it was.
Yes.
All right. Number 3, we have Rachel Layton, aka Diamondback. And I just keep going back to the quote of Jack Monroe. I wonder if she's clean.
Writing for the Times.
Number 2, Bernie Rosenthal. Number 1 in our hearts. And then number 1, top 10, Captain America, romantic love interest, Sharon Carter.
I think, Rick, look, I don't want to state the obvious, but I think it's a testament to Bernie that she was able to compete with 2 women in jumpsuits.
So that's a good point.
It still made number 2 on the list. So
that's a very good point. Bob, you know what? That was fun doing a top 10 list. We're going to have to do another top 10 list. Now, I don't want to get anybody's hopes up because we also talked at the end of episode 9, other top 10 lists we should cover. I think we did say we should do romantic. I think we also said we should do like partners, right?
Yeah.
We mentioned a couple other things back then, but that was so long ago. I don't remember.
No.
Yeah, we'll do another top 10 list. How about this? In this year, in 2023, we'll do another top 10 list.
I like that. We put that marker commitment out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Hold us accountable, folks.
Now, Bob, I did promise that
did.
I would tell everybody the other reason that I picked the Love Boat theme. Now, other than the fact that, hey, it's a catchy tune and it's romantic, and quite frankly, the age of our listeners probably wouldn't know the song. But I just want to point something out to you, Bob. if you take our top 3 votes, Sharon Carter, she debuted in 1966. Bernie Rosenthal debuted in 1980. Rachel Layton, Diamondback, debuted in 1985. Now, if you take those 3 years and you add them up and divide by 3, what is the average year, Bob?
I have no idea, Rick. But
that would be 1977 when the Love Boat theme came out.
Rick needs help. Again, I see him down in his basement with the string and the thumbtacks on the wall. You know, it's a beautiful mind. Yeah, that's what I. Wow, beautiful work.
My it's a gift. What can I say?
Next week he'll be plotting the path of the Artemis 2 rocket.
That's right. Actually, next week we're going to be going to we're doing another what if story, Bob. We've only done a few what ifs so far, but we're going to do What If Volume 1, number 4.
Ooh. We've gotten a lot of requests for that one. I think probably every day at least 2 or 3 letters come in for me.
Yeah. And it is, what if the invaders had stayed together after World War II?
Yeah.
Now, this is actually a really, really important story because Roy Thomas did an amazing retcon here where he introduces the other Captain Americas. He introduces William Naslund. He introduces Jeff Mace as basically the new Captain Americas that replaced Steve Rogers. So it's a brilliant retcon. Am I wrong?
Blows your mind, doesn't it?
Okay.
Like the level of creativity and originality in like just coming up with that. Oh, I can't wait to dive into this.
Yeah, it is. It's a key story in the Captain America mythos, and we're very excited to cover this finally because I've been holding off on this for a very special reason. So make sure you come back next episode where we get into What If Volume 1, number 4.
I can't wait for that one.
As always, it's been fun wrapping cap with you.
It has, Rick. I can't wait till next week. Can't wait.
All right. He's Bob Lucius. I'm Rick Verbanis, and you have been listening to another episode of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast. All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
Love. Exciting and new. Come aboard. We're expecting you. And love.
Yeah.
Life's sweetest reward. Let it flow. It floats back to you. The love boats. Soon we'll be making another run. The love boats. Promises something for everyone. Okay.
Oh, well.
I think we burned that song.
We burned that one.